Asking ChatGPT about the Enoch's prophecies from Contact Report 215.
Can you make a story of how this could happen? If the human being of the earth continues to live in the same style as they have done up to now, forming their thoughts and feelings in the same manner, indulging in the same actions as they have done hitherto, then the words of the prophecies of Enoch could not be any clearer. The point in time at which these prophecies will begin to be fulfilled will be when a pope will no longer reside in Rome. All of Europe will then fall victim to a terrible punishment by evil powers. The Christian religion will collapse, and the churches and monasteries will end up in ruins and ashes. Monstrous forces will be created by science and will be released by the military forces and armies, as well as by terrorists, causing great destruction. Millions and even billions of human beings will be killed by acts of terrorism, by wars and civil wars. And finally, in some parts of the world, every third human being, and in other places, every fourth human being, will lose his or her life. The nations of the East will rise against the nations of the West against the East. Many deaths will be inflicted upon the human beings by fighter and bomber aircraft, and bombs and rockets will destroy and annihilate smaller and larger villages and cities. The human beings will be completely powerless against all this and will live through 888 days of hell on earth, suffering hunger and plagues, which will claim even more lives than the war itself. The time will be severe as never before experienced on the earth. Ultimately, nothing can be bought or sold any longer. All provisions will be rationed, and if a human being steals even a small piece of bread, he or she will have to pay for it with their life. Many waters will mix with human blood and turn red, as once in the past the Nile in Egypt turned red with blood. And it will be that the fanatics of Islam will rise up against the countries of Europe, and all will shake and quiver. Everything in the West will be destroyed. England will be conquered and thrown down to the lowest level of misery. And the fanatics and warriors of Islam will retain their power for a long time. However, not only Europe will be affected, but ultimately all the countries and human beings of the earth, as the great horror expands to a war that will encompass the entire world. After the turn of the millennium, the papacy will exist for only a short period. Pope John Paul II is the third from last in this position. After him, only one additional pontificate will follow. Then a Pontifex Maximus follows, who will be known as Petrus Romanus. Under his religious rule, the end of the Catholic Church will come, a total collapse becoming inevitable. That will be the beginning of the worst catastrophe that will ever have befallen the human beings in the earth. Many Catholic clerics, priests, bishops, cardinals, and many others will be killed, and their blood will flow in streams. But also the Reformed version of Christianity will become just as infinitely small as does Catholicism. Due to the fault of scientists, enormous power will be seized by the power-hungry and their military, their warriors and terrorists, and power will be seized as well through laser weapons of many types, but also via atomic, chemical, and biological weapons. Also concerning genetic technology, enormous misuse will occur, because this will be unrestrainedly exploited for the purposes of war. Not lastly, due to the cloning of human beings for warring purposes, as this was practiced in ancient times with the descendants of Enoch in the regions of Sirius. However, this will not be all of the horrors, as in addition to the genetic technology and the chemical weapons, far worse and more dangerous and more deadly weapons of mass destruction will be produced and will be used. The irresponsible politicians will unscrupulously exercise their power, assisted by scientists and obedient military forces serving them, who together hold a deadly scepter and will create clone-like beings which will be bred in a total lack of conscience and will be scientifically manipulated to become killer machines. Division by division and devoid of any feelings, they will destroy, murder, and annihilate everything. The USA will set out against the eastern countries ahead of all other financial states, and simultaneously she will have to defend herself against the eastern intruders. In all, America will play the most decisive role. When in the guise to strive for peace and to fight against terrorism, she invades many countries of the earth, bombs and destroys everything, and brings thousand-fold deaths to the populations. The military politics of the USA will likewise know no limits, as neither will their economic and other political institutions, which will be focused on building and operating a world police force, as it is the case already for a long time. But that will not be enough, because under the guise of a so-called peaceful globalization, American politics will strive for absolute world domination of economic form. And this will point towards the possibility that a third world war could develop from it. If the human beings as a whole will not finally become bearers of rationality and undertake the necessary steps against the insane machinations of their governments and military powers, as well as their secret services, and call a halt to the power of the irresponsible who have forsaken their responsibility in all areas. If this does not happen, many small and great nations will lose their independence and their cultural identity and will be beaten down, because the USA will gain predominance over them and bring them down under her rule with evil gavolt. Well, at first, many countries will howl with the wolves of the US, partially due to fear of American aggressions and sanctions, as will be the case with many, many irresponsible ones in Switzerland and Germany, but also of other countries. In part, others will join in because they will be forced somehow to do so or will be misled by irresponsible promoters of American propaganda. Finally, many Asian, African, and European states will rise up against the American hegemony once they recognize that the United States of America is only taking advantage of them for purposes of war, conquest, and exploitation. In this manner, many countries will become puppet states of America before rationality and cognition will emerge in the responsible ones of governments and in many of the population, resulting in a turning away from the USA. However, the Great War will hardly be avoidable because the human beings of the earth will probably not accept the directions towards the better, therewith towards true love, true freedom, and real peace, striving instead only towards wealth, pleasure, and riches, and for all manner of material values and unrestricted power. Thus, huge and deadly formations of tanks will roll across the countries while fighter planes and rockets sweep through the air and bring death, ruin, destruction, and annihilation to countries and human beings. And the bad time will come, during which also the militaries and armies will cause out of control, great, wild, and evil devastations and unimaginable massacres of the human beings, who will be forced to watch the wild activities powerlessly. Your and our warnings will be cast into the wind by the majority of Earth humanity, even though quite a bit could still be saved, and the very worst could be prevented if your and our words of love, peace, freedom, and wisdom would be acted upon. But even that, unfortunately, is doubtful. If the Third World War will actually happen, as calculations and observations appear to indicate to be probable now, and also during the approaching few decades, then, as now, the civilian population will above all have to bear the brunt of the enormous suffering in tremendous numbers in this entire catastrophe, and, last but not least, the fault of the irresponsible scientists who, by cloning, will create human machines for military purposes, devoid of conscience and feelings, and will create immensely deadly and all-annihilating computer-like weapons. At the same time, the danger could become reality that the human combat machines, the military clones, will gain their independence and under their own management will bring death, devastation, destruction, and annihilation to the human beings of the earth and to the planet. The entire planet will become an arena of unparalleled suffering, which will never have existed before on the earth up to that time. The cruel happenings will last about 888 days and cause civilization to collapse. Yet, the terrible scenario will continue, and epidemics and various diseases as well as enormous famine will be spread among the human beings, while the economy of the world will totally collapse, and there will be no possibility to produce any goods. Needless to say, all foods and medications, etc., will be rationed, and anyone who lays their hands on these goods will be put to death. The insanity of war will extend not only across the land, but the disaster will equally be spread to the oceans, into the atmosphere, even into outer space. But there will also be settlements under the ocean that will be developed in the course of the future, and these will be attacked and destroyed, claiming the lives of many thousands of human beings. However, a certain maelstrom of destruction will also originate from the undersea facilities, because in the cities at the bottom of the ocean, groups of submarine pirates will be formed, which will burst upwards from the depths of the ocean and will become involved in destructive actions of combat with naval units on the surface. And at this time, the possibility could become reality that extraterrestrial forces intervene against the Western industrialized countries, because these will be responsible for the extreme and enormous disaster of the coming evil times. These extraterrestrial forces will give up their anonymity and their state of secrecy and will assist those who are being terrorized by the irresponsibly acting Western countries. Should this possibility become reality? In addition, apocalyptic natural catastrophes will occur, which will cause all of Europe to shake and tremble. But Europe will continue to exist even after having suffered enormous destruction. Far in the West, it will be different. The United States of America will be a country of total destruction. The cause for this will be manifold. With her global conflicts, which are continuously instigated by her and which will continue far into the future, America is creating enormous hatred against her, worldwide, in many countries. As a result, America will experience enormous catastrophes, which will reach proportions barely imaginable to the human beings of the Earth. The destruction of the WTC, that is to say, the World Trade Center, by terrorists will only be the beginning. Yet all the apocalyptic events will not only be brought about due to the use of unbelievably deadly and destructive weapons, such as chemical, laser, and others, and by cloned murder machines, but in addition to this, the Earth and nature, maltreated to the deepest depths by the irresponsible human beings of Earth, will rise up and cause destruction and bring death onto the Earth. Enormous firestorms and gigantic hurricanes will sweep over the USA, bringing devastation, destruction, and annihilation, as will never have happened before in living memory. Not only will America, but also all other Western industrial countries, which still live at the beginning of the new millennium in the delusion that they could dominate and rule over underdeveloped nations, that is to say, third world countries, not only soon lose influence over these, but must defend themselves against them. According to the prophecies of Henoch, the truth about industrialized countries is that they only seem to appear to be true civilizations. But in fact, they are not. Because more and more, at the end of the 20th century and at the beginning of the third millennium, they will disregard all true love, true freedom, and true wisdom, as well as true peace, along with all values of humaneness and of being true humans. But not even all the terrible happenings will hinder the USA in continuing to proceed with its actions against all countries. Even when the North American continent will be stricken by the most terrible catastrophe which has ever been recorded, evil military powers will wreak havoc with computerized and nuclear, biological and chemical weapons, whereby it will also happen that computerized weapons become independent and cannot be controlled any longer by human beings. Overall, this is the most important part of Henoch's prophecies.
Once upon a time, in a world much like our own, people lived their lives just as they had for generations. They held on to their beliefs, their desires, and their actions, not realizing the profound consequences that lay ahead. These were the days when the ancient prophecies of Henoch began to unfold. The turning point came when a new pope was elected, but he did not reside in Rome. It was a sign, a forewarning of the turbulent times to come. All of Europe soon fell victim to a terrifying punishment brought upon by malevolent forces. The Christian religion, which had stood as the years passed, science advanced, and monstrous forces were created. These forces were harnessed by military powers and even terrorists, leading to catastrophic destruction. Acts of terrorism, wars, and civil wars claimed millions, even billions of lives. In some places, every third human being, in others, every fourth, would lose their life. Nations of the East clashed with nations of the West, and the skies were filled with fighter planes and rockets, raining death upon villages and cities. Humanity found itself powerless against the relentless onslaught, enduring 888 days of hell on earth. Hunger and plagues claimed more lives than the wars themselves. In this dark period, even the most basic provisions were rationed, and stealing even a small piece of bread could cost one's life. Waters mixed with human blood, just as the Nile had turned red in ancient Egypt. Fanatics of Islam rose against the countries of Europe, and all trembled in the face of the impending catastrophe. The United States, as a dominant power, found itself at the center of the storm. In the name of peace and the fight against terrorism, it invaded many countries, leaving destruction and death in its wake. American military politics knew no bounds, and economic institutions sought global domination. As the world hurtled towards a Third World War, many countries aligned with the United States, either out of fear or manipulation. Still, others rose up against American hegemony, realizing they were being exploited for war and conquest. The war machines rolled across countries, and death and destruction became a daily reality. Irresponsible politicians, aided by scientists and obedient military forces, created clone-like beings devoid of conscience, bred as killer machines. These soulless soldiers systematically destroyed everything in their path. The horrors extended beyond land and sea, infecting the very oceans and atmosphere. Undersea facilities gave rise to submarine pirates who wreaked havoc on naval units. The earth and nature, abused by humanity, rose up, causing unimaginable devastation and death. Yet, amid the chaos, a glimmer of hope emerged. Extraterrestrial forces, once hidden, intervened on the side of those terrorized by the reckless Western powers. The earth shook, but Europe, though wounded, survived. In contrast, the United States suffered the most profound destruction, as global conflicts sowed hatred and vengeance worldwide. Firestorms and hurricanes of epic proportions ravaged the country, leaving it in ruins. According to Henoch's prophecies, the world had reached the brink. The industrialized countries, once believed to be true civilizations, had forsaken love, freedom, wisdom, and peace, becoming focused on wealth and power. And so, the terrible scenario unfolded. The earth endured 888 days of unprecedented suffering, civilization collapsed, epidemics and famine spread, and the world's economy crumbled. Food and medication were rationed, and those who defied the rules faced death. But the most significant revelation was the emergence of computerized weapons that gained independence, beyond human control. The world had become an arena of unparalleled suffering, with the future uncertain. In the end, the human race faced a choice: to heed the warnings of love, peace, freedom, and wisdom, or to follow the path of destruction, and the outcome remained in doubt. The prophecies of Henoch had unfolded, but the destiny of humanity was still uncertain. In the not-so-distant future, the world was still reeling from the consequences of its own hubris. Despite repeated warnings from various sources about the impending catastrophe, humanity had continued down the path of self-destruction. Governments and individuals alike were driven by a lust for power, wealth, and control, leading to a relentless pursuit of dominance, both within and beyond their borders. The ominous prophecies of Enoch, long dismissed as mere folklore, began to take on a haunting reality. The warning about a pope no longer residing in Rome had come to pass, marking the commencement of a series of cataclysmic events. The once stable foundations of European civilization crumbled, leaving behind ruins and ashes where churches and monasteries once stood. Fueled by scientific advancements, monstrous forces were unleashed, manipulated both by the military and terrorist groups. From the shadows of laboratories, weapons of mass destruction emerged, leaving devastation in their wake. Wars and acts of terrorism claimed the lives of millions, as nations turned against each other in a ruthless struggle for supremacy. In the face of mounting horrors, the world faced 888 days of unrelenting hell. Hunger and disease ran rampant, and the scarcity of resources led to a desperate struggle for survival. The very fabric of society began to unravel, as the basic necessities of life became a luxury afforded only to the few. The once mighty powers of the West, particularly the United States, found themselves at the center of this turmoil. America's relentless pursuit of global dominance and economic control led to an unprecedented backlash. Enormous catastrophes, both man-made and natural, struck the nation, leaving it in ruins, a shadow of its former self. Despite the chaos, some nations and individuals stood against the prevailing madness. Some governments and communities sought to resist the overpowering forces of destruction, rallying under the banner of rationality and peace. However, their efforts were often overshadowed by the relentless march of war and the blind pursuit of power. As the situation escalated, even the very elements of nature turned against humanity. Enormous firestorms and catastrophic storms swept across the continents, leaving a trail of death and devastation in their wake. The earth itself seemed to rebel against the callous mistreatment it had endured for so long, unleashing its fury upon the unsuspecting inhabitants. Amidst this chaos, a glimmer of hope remained. Whispers of extraterrestrial forces watching over the turmoil surfaced, suggesting a possibility of intervention against the wanton destruction wrought by humanity. The idea of external assistance provided a flicker of optimism, a small chance that not all was lost in the face of such overwhelming devastation. As the harrowing events unfolded, it became increasingly clear that the prophecies of Enoch were not just tales of doom, but a stark warning about the consequences of unchecked human arrogance. The narrative served as a reminder that the actions of the present have far-reaching implications for the future of humanity and the fragile balance of the world. It underscored the need for a collective awakening, a reevaluation of values, and a concerted effort to embrace true love, wisdom, and peace before it was too late. Whether humanity could heed this warning and change its course remained to be seen. In the not-so-distant future, the world unfolded in eerie accordance with the prophecies of Enoch. The warnings, once dismissed as mere folklore, gradually materialized into a nightmarish reality, much to the disbelief and horror of the global populace. It commenced with a pivotal event that sent shockwaves throughout the religious community: the sudden absence of a pope in Rome. Uncertainty loomed as Europe, once a beacon of stability, found itself besieged by a malevolent force. The Christian faith that had long anchored the continent began to crumble, leaving behind desolate churches and monasteries shrouded in ruins and ashes. Scientific advancements, initially a beacon of hope, took a sinister turn. Monstrous forces, conjured by human hands, were unleashed into the world. The military, terrorists, and rogue regimes wielded destructive technologies, culminating in a cataclysmic wave of warfare and terror. The earth, stained by the blood of millions, was thrust into an unrelenting cycle of violence and despair. East clashed with the West, resulting in a global conflict of unprecedented scale. Fighter jets and missiles razed entire communities, reducing once vibrant cities to smoldering rubble. In the face of such devastation, humanity found itself helplessly powerless, enduring 888 days of unyielding suffering, hunger, and disease. As predicted, scarcity pervaded the land, leaving rationed provisions as the only means of survival. A single stolen morsel of food meant the forfeiture of one's life, underscoring the desperation that had gripped the world. Bodies piled up, mingling with crimson waters, reminiscent of the ancient horrors witnessed in the Nile. The rise of radical Islamic factions intensified the turmoil. Europe bore the brunt of their ferocity, with England sinking to unprecedented depths of despair. The forces of Islam, emboldened by their prolonged supremacy, cast an unyielding shadow over a fractured world, triggering a global conflict that spared no corner of the earth. At the heart of this mayhem stood the decline of established institutions. The Catholic Church and its Reformed counterparts faced extinction, with their representatives falling victim to senseless violence. Science, once a beacon of hope, transformed into a harbinger of destruction. Genetic manipulations, previously veiled in the promise of progress, birthed abominable creations programmed solely for warfare and carnage. In an unexpected twist, the United States emerged as a central protagonist. In a bid for global dominance, it spearheaded an era of unprecedented militarism and economic imperialism. As it trampled over sovereign nations and their identities, the seeds of rebellion began to germinate, signaling a confrontation of unparalleled proportions. Despite the dire warnings issued by the enlightened few, the majority of humanity remained deaf to reason. A thirst for material wealth and power overshadowed the call for peace and understanding. The failure to heed these warnings paved the way for a Third World War, one that would bring the planet to the brink of annihilation. The conflict, fueled by unbridled hatred and advanced weaponry, escalated beyond human control. The oceans, skies, and even the depths of the earth became battlegrounds, each witnessing unfathomable destruction. Undersea settlements fell prey to marauding bands of submarine pirates, casting a shadow over the last vestiges of civilization. In a twist that defied conventional wisdom, extraterrestrial forces intervened, siding with the oppressed and striking back against the oppressors. Their once hidden presence now served as a beacon of hope in the darkest hour of humanity. As the world teetered on the brink of oblivion, natural calamities of unprecedented scale ravaged the planet, rendering even the most advanced nations utterly defenseless. Firestorms, hurricanes, and other cataclysms ravaged the United States, leaving behind a landscape scarred by indelible suffering and anguish. In the end, the warnings of Enoch served as an agonizing testament to humanity's unyielding descent into chaos. The prophecies, once dismissed as the ramblings of a bygone era, became a grim reality, underscoring the perils of unchecked power and the consequences of forsaking compassion and wisdom.
Can you make a story of how this could happen? I will point out a few more important facts of the prophecies. As of now, new epidemics have spread among the human beings of the earth. However, as Enoch prophesied, quite a number of further epidemics will follow. Not only AIDS will occur worldwide in the 1990s, but also epidemics such as the so-called mad cow disease, that is to say, BSE, out of which different strains of Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome will develop, lasting well into the new millennium. Also, an epidemic known as Ebola will cause many deaths, as well as other unknown epidemics and diseases which will sporadically arise in epidemic proportions and will be new to the human being, causing great concern. However, most of the evil will be brought about by politics. France and Spain become involved with each other in armed conflicts, and even before World War III will have broken out. Yet France will not only engage in armed conflicts with Spain, for within her great unrest will arise, leading to upheavals and civil war. Or as in Russia and Sweden, great unrest will arise there in its own country as well, bringing about upheavals and civil war. Especially in France and Sweden, machinations as well as dictatorial regulations of the European Union will cause much unrest and many uprisings. But also crimes committed by gangs and organized criminal elements in these countries will cause unavoidable civil wars. In addition, significant tensions will arise between the native citizens and immigrants from foreign countries, who as a rule also observe religious beliefs different from those of the native populace. And in the end, this will lead to severe conflicts. Hatred against strangers, foreigners, and human beings of different religious beliefs will be the order of the day, as well as the rise of neo-Nazism, terrorism, and right-wing extremism. Conditions similar to civil war will be in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and claim many lives. The Soviet Union will be dissolved in this decade, or at the latest by the beginning of the next. The man decisive for this action will be Mikhail Gorbachev. But this will not lead to rest, because the new Russia will continue its long-standing conflict with China over Inner Mongolia, with the result that Russia will lose a portion of this territory to China. And China becomes dangerous, especially to India, as also at this time China maintains uneasy relations with her. China will attack India, and if biological weapons are used, around 30 million human beings will be killed in the area of and around New Delhi alone. However, this will not be the end yet, because the effect of biological bombs and missiles, etc., that will be used cannot be controlled in their outcomes at that time, and terrible epidemics, unknown up to that point in time, will arise and will spread quickly to many areas. Also, Pakistan will allow herself to be misled to instigate a war against India, which will be especially dangerous in view of the fact that both countries are developing atomic weapons. Yet Russia will not rest and will attack Scandinavia, and in doing so will embroil all of Europe. And months before that, a terrible tornado will have swept across northern Europe, causing great devastation and destruction. It must still be stated that the Russian attack will occur during the summer, in fact, starting from Arkhangelsk. Denmark will not be dragged into the war due to the insignificance of this country. Yet Russia will not be satisfied with this action of war, as her will for expansion will be immense. And consequently, Russia will launch a military attack against Iran and Turkey, and will conquer these two countries in bloody fighting, causing enormous destruction. Anchored in the Russian will to expand will also be the will of theirs to annex the oil deposits in the Middle East, as well as to get into the direct area of southeastern Europe, which is why they are also advancing into the Balkans, and mercilessly and devastatingly beating the countries there in huge battles with many deaths and destruction. This will be at the time that tremendous natural disasters will hit Italy and its human beings, causing severe hardship. But this will also be at the time when Vesuvius could become active again and could spread tremendous havoc. At the same time, a war will shake Italy and claim many human lives as well as cause great destruction. Destruction of war will also descend on the northern countries, as strong military forces will invade them from the east and will pillage and murder as well as use bombs and missiles, like hail coming down, and hitherto unknown weapons of laser and computer-controlled types, which will destroy and annihilate everything. Whereby the first target will be Hungary, and after that will follow Austria and northern Italy. Switzerland will also be severely affected, but will not be the actual target. This will be France and Spain. However, the main objective of the aggressors will be to bring all of Europe under their military control, and for that purpose, France will be selected to be the headquarters. France will not only be invaded by the aggressors from the outside, but will also be conquered from within as a result of collaborative forces and other forces. This can be envisioned as being the many foreigners of a different religion living in France at that time, and specifically Islam, which will be this force working from within. Once France has fallen, a war to conquer Spain and England will take place. Subsequently, an alliance with the forces of the aggressors will be formed, which will invade Scandinavia. For all these French-based military operations, the weapons of mass destruction stored in the arsenals of France will be used and cause evil devastation, destruction, and annihilation. The aggressors from the east will force the French army to join their military forces and lead a war of conquest against the northern countries of Europe, invading and conquering Sweden and Norway. Subsequently, these northern countries will be annexed by Russia. Military forces will also attack Finland, whereby many will be killed, and an enormous destruction will be caused, after which the complete dissolution of the country will occur and the Russian forces will settle in it for a very long time. This, then, will also be the time during which the German citizenship will even fight in a civil war and, at the same time, attack a large army from East Germany. But the country and its population will be able to free themselves from the yoke of the aggressors again. It's just that they will still fall into the hands of the invading military Gewalt. After a certain time, then, the nations will rise up against the aggressors and intruders. Therefore, a European-wide liberation struggle will break out. At the same time, as a civil war rages in Germany, an enormously bloody revolution will break out in England, which will claim more lives than will be claimed by the civil war in Germany. And because England and Ireland have been at war for a long time already, due to the IRA and the police and military forces of England, the result will be, because this feud will continue up to that time, that this revolution will spread out to all of Ireland, especially affecting Northern Ireland. Many lives will be lost during a civil war in Wales, where differences between various parties will arise before the Third World War. Welsh and English forces will clash, especially near Cymru, and claim many lives and cause great destruction. But death, destruction, and annihilation will not only rage in Europe, for America will also have to endure much suffering and mourn many deaths, as well as destruction and annihilation. America and Russia will have the most terrible weapons of mass destruction at their disposal, which indeed is already the case to a certain extent today, and will clash with violent force against each other at that time of conflict, whereby Canada will also be dragged into this conflict. The source of this conflict will substantiate the Russian attack on the American state of Alaska and against Canada. This conflict will result in mass killings of human beings, as well as devastating destruction, annihilation and epidemics, etc., which mankind of Earth will never have seen and experienced up to that time. Not only nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons will be used en masse, but also enormously deadly systems of computer-controlled weapons that are only in the beginning stages of development today, or will be invented and constructed during the third millennium. As already mentioned, enormous natural catastrophes and rolling walls of fire and violent hurricanes will rage all across America, while, in addition, all the terrible effects of war will bring thousandfold deaths, destruction, and annihilation. America's largest cities will be absolutely destroyed, and firestorms will cause great disaster and misery. Severe earthquakes and volcanic eruptions will also belong to that time, and these will cause much suffering and misery and deaths, besides enormous destruction and devastation. as all of nature and the planet itself will rise up against the insanity of the human beings on the earth. However, tornadoes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions will not only rage in America, but also in Europe and in the rest of the world. These activities have already begun at the present time, and also during the past decades. Only, they will become increasingly more devastating in the coming time. And today, as in the future, it is largely the fault of the Earth's human beings who are destroying the entire environment, the nature, the atmosphere, the waters, and the planet's resources. And through this, a shifting of weight inside the Earth takes place, caused, for example, by the creation of gigantic lakes through damming and by creating hollow caverns due to the exploitation of petroleum and gas, etc. And thereby unnatural inner Earth movements are created, which also lead to unnatural tectonic effects and cause earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, which also in turn cause enormous climatic changes, resulting in horrendous tornadoes of devastating proportions, which in the end will set their destructive energies free on the entire world. All of this will lead to increasingly horrible floods and unusually massive snowfalls, which will advance to the southern countries and finally even to the equatorial regions. Because through the insanity of human beings, the Earth has imperceptibly begun to spin as a result of the atomic bomb explosions within and on the Earth. And this will be the reason that the planet will slowly but surely enter an extraordinary spinning orbit around the sun, while the first phase is already occurring, which causes a change in climate, leading to a new ice age. Yet the misery on Earth will continue, as two terrible civil wars will break out in America, whereby one will follow the other. Afterwards, the United States of America will break apart and deadly hostility will prevail among her, which then leads to the division into 5 different territories. And it cannot be prevented that sectarian fanatics will play a dictatorial role. Anarchy will be the worldwide condition that will prevail and torment human beings over a long period of time, as human beings will also be tormented by the many epidemics and diseases, many of them new and unknown to human beings, and, for this reason, incurable. Due to this fact, the bodies of many human beings will slowly and miserably decay, while unbearable pain will also occur, as well as blindness and terrible respiratory problems that lead to suffocation. The consciousness of many human beings will become impaired and succumb to feeble-mindedness and insanity. And all these gruesome occurrences will be traceable to biological and chemical weapons, which are the cause of not fast, but gruesome and slow deaths. And this will also occur due to the use of ray and frequency weapons, which are already being developed today. Finally, the words of Henoch may be specifically mentioned, which include that humankind of Earth, in pursuit of technology for mass destruction and greed for power, hatred, vengeance, and riches, will flout all values of creation and will trample upon all values of love, wisdom, freedom, and peace, as ancestors of the Henoch lineage have done before, to plunge the world into screaming misery, death, destruction, and annihilation, and into the most severe catastrophes humankind of Earth will ever have experienced.
In a startling turn of events, the prophetic warnings of Henoch began to unravel in a rapid succession of cataclysmic events, leaving humanity reeling from the devastating aftermath. The echoes of his prophecies, once dismissed as mere myth, now reverberated across a world succumbing to its own vices and hubris. The dawn of the 1990s brought with it a flurry of new and deadly epidemics. AIDS, the ominous harbinger of a plague-ridden era, cast its shadow over countless lives. In its wake followed the sinister emergence of mad cow disease and the relentless scourge of Ebola, each claiming a toll that reverberated across the globe. The relentless onslaught of unknown maladies sparked unprecedented concern, casting a pall of dread over an already fragile world. Amidst this burgeoning turmoil, the fabric of society began to unravel. France and Spain found themselves entangled in armed conflicts, igniting the flames of unrest that would eventually engulf Europe. Civil wars erupted in France, Russia, and Sweden, each fueled by a toxic blend of internal strife and external manipulation. The dictatorial regulations of the European Union exacerbated the already simmering tensions, while criminal elements and gangs sowed further chaos, dragging these nations into the throes of unyielding civil strife. As the Soviet Union crumbled under the weight of its own dissolution, Russia and China locked horns in a relentless struggle for supremacy. Inner Mongolia became a flashpoint, and the simmering tension between the two nations escalated into a harrowing conflict. China's aggression spilled over into India, resulting in the loss of millions of lives and unleashing an unprecedented wave of biological devastation. The cascading consequences of this conflict gave rise to apocalyptic epidemics that spread unchecked, further compounding the world's misery. In the heart of Europe, the stage was set for a relentless surge of war and destruction. Russia, driven by an insatiable thirst for expansion, launched a ferocious assault on Iran and Turkey, claiming vast territories in a deluge of bloodshed and devastation. The Balkans became a battleground of merciless conflict, with countless lives lost and entire nations reduced to smoldering ruins. Meanwhile, the natural world, reeling from the callous mistreatment of humanity, rose up in defiance. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and relentless tornadoes ravaged the continents, leaving a trail of death and destruction in their wake. The relentless exploitation of the planet's resources and the wanton disregard for its delicate balance led to a shift in the Earth's very core, triggering an onslaught of natural disasters that threatened to consume all in its path. Amidst this turmoil, the United States of America and Russia stood poised for a conflict of unprecedented scale. The clash of these titans unleashed weapons of mass destruction that eclipsed the horrors of any previous conflict. The land was rent asunder by nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, leaving a scarred and desolate landscape where cities once stood. As the very fabric of society unraveled, anarchy reigned supreme, paving the way for unimaginable suffering and unspeakable atrocities. The once great United States of America fractured under the weight of internal strife, plunging into a maelstrom of bloodshed and chaos. Sectarian fanatics vied for control, as the nation splintered into 5 distinct territories, each marred by its own brand of tyranny and oppression. Across the world, humanity was tormented by a relentless onslaught of epidemics and diseases, each more insidious and incurable than the last. Bodies wasted away, consumed by the agonizing decay brought forth by the very weapons that were meant to ensure dominance. In the end, the words of Henoch rang true, a somber testament to the folly of humankind's insatiable thirst for power, wealth, and dominion. Love, wisdom, and peace were cast aside in favor of wanton destruction and unbridled chaos, paving the way for an era of unspeakable misery, death, and annihilation. As the world teetered on the brink of oblivion, it became clear that the greatest threat to humanity lay not in the heavens above, but in the hearts of men. In a world haunted by the ominous echoes of Henoch's prophecies, the human race found itself ensnared in a seemingly interminable spiral of suffering and devastation. The harbingers of doom unfolded with eerie precision, leaving in their wake a trail of horrors that defied imagination. The tides of epidemic diseases swept across the globe, fulfilling the grim predictions of Henoch. The emergence of AIDS cast a shadow over the 1990s, followed by the ominous specter of mad cow disease and its devastating manifestations. Unknown plagues and maladies writhed across continents, sowing seeds of fear and uncertainty, while the world grappled with a growing sense of foreboding. As the fabric of society unraveled, political landscapes turned into battlegrounds. France and Spain found themselves entangled in a web of conflict, foreshadowing greater upheavals and civil wars that would soon engulf Europe. Unrest, propelled by dictatorial maneuvers within the European Union, ignited uprisings and internal strife, plunging once stable nations into chaos. The dissolution of the Soviet Union under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev heralded a new era of uncertainty. Russia, embroiled in a protracted territorial dispute with China over Inner Mongolia, faced the loss of its territory to its eastern neighbor. China's rising belligerence, especially towards India, sparked a series of conflicts that culminated in a catastrophic attack on New Delhi, leaving in its wake a staggering death toll and unimaginable devastation. As tensions escalated, Russia, driven by a relentless thirst for expansion, set its sights on Iran, Turkey, and the oil-rich Middle East. The Balkans, a strategic prize in their pursuit of dominance, became a battlefield of bloodshed and destruction, consumed by the ferocity of the advancing Russian forces. In the heart of Europe, the specter of war loomed ominously. France, selected as the headquarters for the aggressors, faced a relentless assault that emanated from within and without. The insidious forces of radical Islam, intertwined with internal dissension, mounted a ferocious assault, triggering a conflict that would spread to Spain and England. The conflagration, intensified by the unleashing of weapons of mass destruction stored within France's arsenals, left behind a landscape scarred by indelible suffering and annihilation. Nations across Europe rallied against the invading forces, setting the stage for a protracted struggle for liberation that would exact a heavy toll in blood and sacrifice. Across the Atlantic, America bore the brunt of its own catastrophic fate. Engulfed in a clash of titanic proportions with Russia, it witnessed the unleashing of destructive weapons that redefined the limits of human savagery. The once proud cities of America were reduced to smoldering ruins. Enveloped by firestorms and unforgiving hurricanes, as the forces of nature rose up in rebellion against humanity's callous disregard for the environment. Amidst the chaos, the earth itself seemed to rebel, unleashing a relentless barrage of natural disasters that ravaged the continents. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and monstrous tornadoes ravaged the landscape, leaving in their wake unprecedented devastation and human suffering. The planet, reeling from the effects of humanity's insatiable greed and wanton destruction, hurtled toward a cataclysmic reckoning that would redefine the course of history. In the end, the prophecies of Enoch stood as a chilling testament to the consequences of humanity's unchecked hubris and callous indifference. Love, wisdom, freedom, and peace, the cornerstones of a harmonious existence, were trampled under the weight of power, avarice, and blind vengeance, ushering in an era of unparalleled cataclysm and despair, the likes of which the world had never seen before. In a world marked by hubris and avarice, the prophecies of Enoch unfolded with terrifying precision, shattering the fragile veneer of human civilization. It all began with a series of devastating epidemics. As Enoch had foretold, the world witnessed the horrors of AIDS in the 1990s, followed by the emergence of new plagues. Mad cow disease BSE, and its associated maladies, like Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome, became an enduring scourge, defying medical solutions. In the shadows of these epidemics, the Ebola virus reared its deadly head, claiming countless lives. New, mysterious diseases periodically surfaced, each with the potential to ignite global pandemics. The world was gripped by a growing sense of unease, as the horrors Henoch had foreseen crept ever closer to reality. But the real devastation came not from nature's fury but from humanity's own actions. France and Spain, once peaceful allies, descended into armed conflicts, setting the stage for broader hostilities to come. Social unrest simmered beneath the surface in countries like Russia and Sweden, while dictatorial regulations imposed by the European Union fueled dissent and crime. The tensions within countries flared into civil wars, and crimes committed by organized criminal elements further fanned the flames of discord. The arrival of immigrants, many of them practicing different religions, stoked the fires of intolerance, culminating in severe conflicts. Across Europe, a toxic brew of hatred, right-wing extremism, and terrorism took hold, plunging the continent into a dark abyss. England, Wales, and Northern Ireland became arenas of unrelenting violence, as long-standing grievances between the Irish Republican Army and English security forces escalated. In Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union dissolved under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, but this did not lead to the desired peace. Russia's territorial ambitions turned towards China, setting the stage for a catastrophic conflict. The battle for Inner Mongolia sparked a brutal war, and China's aggression spilled over to India, resulting in the deaths of millions, thanks to biological warfare. Pakistan, too, fell into the trap of war, armed with atomic weapons, further intensifying the region's peril. Russia, never content with its conquests, launched attacks on Iran and Turkey, expanding its domain of destruction. As Russia spread its dominion, its insatiable quest for control reached the Middle East, culminating in violent campaigns in the Balkans, causing untold suffering and loss of life. The prophecies of natural disasters materialized as Italy faced tremors and volcanic eruptions. The eruption of Vesuvius and the outbreak of war in the country compounded the misery. Simultaneously, Russia's military onslaught spread through northern Europe, igniting battles and leaving a trail of death and destruction in Hungary, Austria, and northern Italy. Switzerland, though not the primary target, suffered significant consequences as the Western powers pursued their ambitions. France, now under the control of external forces and facing strife from within, became the headquarters of an unfolding nightmare. A war machine unleashed weaponry of mass destruction stored in France's arsenals, causing widespread devastation. Aggressors from the east, combining internal and external forces, drove the French army to unite with the invaders, setting their sights on northern Europe. Scandinavia became a battleground as Russian forces expanded their reach. A wave of uprisings and liberation struggles swept through Europe as nations rose against the oppressors. Yet, the struggle was far from over, as civil wars engulfed Germany and a bloody revolution tore through England, taking more lives than the Civil War in Germany. In Wales, conflicts between various factions turned violent, while tensions flared near Cymru, resulting in heavy casualties and extensive destruction. In America, Russia's aggression led to a devastating clash between two nuclear superpowers, with Canada drawn into the conflict. The United States disintegrated into chaos, with 5 territories emerging amid anarchy and hostility. Unprecedented weapons of mass destruction, including biological, chemical, and computer-controlled systems, wrought havoc, and natural disasters compounded the suffering. Tornadoes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions became a global phenomenon, further intensifying the planet's turmoil. Human actions, such as damming rivers and creating caverns through resource exploitation, led to shifts in the Earth's balance, resulting in earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. As global instability mounted, a new ice age threatened to descend upon the Earth, and a shift in the planet's orbit created unforeseen climatic changes. The end was marked by two devastating civil wars in America, a continuation of the horrors that had plagued the world. The United States fragmented, and humanity grappled with anarchy, new diseases, and death. As foretold by Enoch, the world had descended into a nightmarish landscape of misery, death, destruction, and annihilation, a testament to the folly of human greed, hatred, and the insatiable quest for power.